Hello, my name is Pamela Cook-Miller, and I am the president and founder of the Storytelling Resource Place. We have been open to the public since 2016, celebrating our 5th year, celebrating our unique mission to collect, to preserve, and to make available storytelling resources. We are the only library museum of storytelling resources in the entire country, and it is located here in Jonesborough, Tennessee, the capital of storytelling. And we are very pleased today to be able to, with the help of Tom and Karen Hitchcock, to tape our program of readers so that you will be able to tune in and enjoy another way of receiving a story, reading from our favorite books. So I'd like to tell you now a little bit about the things we kept in mind as we decided about this program. Storytelling is not only a person on a stage, but also a person and a book on a stage. The book represents the author, and there is a unique comradeship and closeness when someone reads to you. Do you remember those memories, your early childhood memories? When someone read to you, it was a gift. It was a special time. When you were small, maybe you were sitting in their lap even. And one of our readers today will tell you about that very interaction. But whether or not you're sitting in your loved one's lap as you listen to this, we are hoping these readings will help you form an accompaniment as you go through wrapping presents, baking things, decorating your home. Christmas is a time of sharing. It's a time of reaching out. And so we wanted to do that, a special present from the Storytelling Resource Place, a present of reading of special Christmas stories. And with that in mind, we'd like to turn to a lyric. The lyric is from The Little Drummer Boy. How many of us have loved that favorite carol? Remember how it goes? The little drummer boy says, "Come, they told me, a newborn king to see. Our finest gifts we bring to lay before our king. So to honor him when we come." But the drummer boy says, "Little baby, I am a poor boy too. I have no gift to bring to you that's fit to give our king. Shall I play for you?" And Mary nodded. The ox and the lamb kept time, and he played his little drum. I played my best for him, and then he smiled at me and my drum. Today, our drum is our ability to read and share literature with you. And so we give you nothing material. We give you a special memory based on our gifts and our willingness to use them to honor the holiday and to bless you. So join with me now to welcome our 5 readers for our Christmas present from the Storytelling Resource Place. For our first reading in our Christmas present from the Storytelling Resource Place to you and your family, we are presenting Richard Griffin. He is the director of the Washington County Libraries, and he has also been a firm supporter and encourager of the Storytelling Resource Place since 2016 and even before. We are very honored to have him with us today and for him to be illustrating to us the joy of books as he reads a very special book for him and for all of us, The Night Before Christmas. A few details about that before we get into his reading, and that is it was written by Clement Moore, according to one account, as a present to his 2 daughters in 1825. And it was published anonymously and has become one of the favorite poems for the entire Christmas season. It seems reasonable that we begin our program with The Night Before Christmas. And so I present to you Richard Griffin.
Today I'm going to read The Night Before Christmas by Clement C. Moore. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Ma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there rose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to the objects below. When what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and he shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Dickson, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop, the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and his beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know that I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and he filled all the stockings, and then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger alongside his nose, and gave a nod, and up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down on a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
For our next reading today in our program, we are presenting a prominent intellectual, the reading of W.D. Howells, who was known as the Dean of American Letters. It's very appropriate that our own Dr. Bill Kennedy and his wife Virginia discovered this very special Christmas story in a book of Christmas stories, but one he had a deep love in his heart for children. And as a matter of fact, W.D. Howells had a daughter named Mildred. This becomes important when you see the delightful interplay between the character of the narrator, who is very much, I assume, like W.D. Howells, an intellect, a writer, a scholar, and his adorable daughter, who crawls on his lap with impunity and asks him to tell her the story of when they could have Christmas every day. And so I present to you now Dr. Bill Kennedy reading Christmas Every Day.
The little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did, Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning because he was very, very busy, but she would not let him. So he began. Well, once there was a little pig. She put her hand over his mouth and stopped him at that word. She said she had heard little pig stories until she was perfectly sick of them. Well, what kind of a story shall I tell you? About Christmas. It's getting to be the season. It's past Thanksgiving already. It seems to me, her papa argued, that I've told as often about Christmas as I have about little pigs. Christmas is more interesting, she said. Well, her papa roused himself from his writing by a great effort. Well, then, I'll tell you about a little girl that wanted it Christmas every day in the year. How would you like that? First rate, said the little girl, and she nestled into a comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening. Very well, then. This little pig, oh, what are you pounding me for? Because you said little pig instead of little girl. I should like to know what's the difference between a little pig and a little girl that wanted it Christmas every day. Papa, said the little girl warmingly, if you don't go on, I'll give it to you. And at this, her papa darted off like lightning and began to tell the story as fast as he could. Well, once there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day in the year. And as soon as Thanksgiving was over, she began to send postal cards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if she mightn't have it. But the old fairy never answered any of the postals. And after a while, the little girl found out that the fairy was pretty particular and wouldn't notice anything but letters, not even correspondence cards in envelopes, but real letters on sheets of paper and sealed outside with a monogram, or your initial anyway. So then she began to send her letters. In about 3 weeks, or just the day before Christmas, it was, she got a letter from the fairy saying that she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and then they would see about having it longer. Well, the little girl was a good deal excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once-a-year Christmas that was coming the next day, and perhaps the fairy's promise didn't make such an impression on her as it would have at some other time. She just resolved to keep it to herself and surprise everybody with it as it kept coming true. Then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas. She went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus have a chance at the stockings. And in the morning, she was up the first of anybody and went and felt the stockings. She found hers all lumpy with packages of candy and oranges and grapes and pocketbooks and rubber balls and all kinds of small presents, and her big brothers with nothing but tongs in them, and her young lady sisters with a new silk umbrella, and her papas and mamas with potatoes and pieces of coal wrapped in tissue paper, just as they always had at Christmas. And she waited around till the rest of the family were up, and she was the first to burst into the library when the doors were open and look at the large presents laid out on the library table. Books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and breastpins and dolls and little stoves and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and snow shovels and photograph frames and little easels and boxes of watercolors, Turkish paste and candied cherries and dolls' houses, waterproofs, and the big Christmas tree lighted and standing in a wastebasket in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas all day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast. And the whole morning, the presents kept pouring in that the delivery men had not had time to deliver the night before. And she went round giving presents as she had got for other people, and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner, and plum pudding and nuts and raisins and oranges and more candy, and then went out and coasted and came in with a stomachache, crying. And her papa said he would see if his house was turned into that sort of fool's paradise another year. They had a light supper, and pretty early everybody went to bed cross. Well, here the little girl pounded her papa again. Well, now, what now? Did I say pig? You made them act like pigs. Well, didn't they? No matter, you oughtn't put that into the story. Very well, then, I'll take it out. Then her father went on with the story. The little girl slept very heavily, and she slept very late, but then she was awakened at last by the other children dancing around her bed with their stockings full of presents in their hands. What is it? Said the little girl, and she rubbed her eyes and tried to rise up in bed. Christmas, 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 they all shouted and waved their stockings. Nonsense. It was Christmas yesterday. Her brothers and sisters just laughed. We don't know about that. It's Christmas today anyway. You come into the library and see. Then all at once it flashed on the little girl that the fairy was keeping her promise and her year of Christmases beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, but she sprang up like a lark that had overeaten itself and gone to bed cross, and darted into the library. There it was again, books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and breastpins. You needn't go over it all, Papa. I guess I can remember just what was there, said the little girl. Well, there was the Christmas tree blazing away, and the family picking out their presents, but looking pretty sleepy, and her father perfectly puzzled, and her mother ready to cry. I'm sure I don't see how I'm going to dispose of all of these things, said her mother, and her father said it seemed to him they had something just like it the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamed it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of a joke, and so she ate so much candy she didn't want any breakfast, and went around carrying presents, and had turkey and cranberry for dinner, and then went out and coasted, and then came back in with a stomachache. Well, the next day, it was just the same thing over again, but everybody getting crosser. And at the end of a week's time, so many people had lost their tempers that you could pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly strewed the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else's, and it made for the most dreadful mix. Well, the little girl began to get frightened, keeping the secret all to herself. She wanted to tell her mother, but she didn't dare to. And she was ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed ungrateful and ill-bred, and she thought she would try to stand it, but she hardly knew how she could for a whole year. So it went on, and it was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day, and Christmas on Washington's birthday, just the same as any day. It didn't skip even the 1st of April, April Fool's Day, though everything was counterfeit that day, and that was a little relief. After a while, coal and potatoes began to be awfully scarce. So many had been wrapped up in tissue paper to fool papas and mamas with. Turkeys got to be about $1,000 apiece, or maybe $2,000. And they got to passing off almost anything for turkeys, even half-grown hummingbirds. The real turkeys were so scarce. And cranberries, well, they asked $1 apiece for the cranberries. All of the woods and orchards were cut down for Christmas trees, and where the woods and orchards used to be, it looked just like a stubble field with stumps. After a while, they had to make Christmas trees out of rags and stuff them with bran like old-fashioned dolls. But there were plenty of rags because people got so poor buying presents for one another that they couldn't get any new clothes, and they just wore their old clothes to tatters. They got so poor that everybody had to go to the poorhouse. Well, after it had gone on for about 3 or 4 months, the little girl, whenever she came into the room in the morning and saw those great, ugly, lumpy stockings dangling from the fireplace and the disgusting presents around everywhere, just sat down and burst out crying. In 6 months, she was perfectly exhausted. She couldn't even cry anymore. She just laid on the lounge and rolled her eyes and panted. About the beginning of October, she took to sitting down on dolls wherever she found them. French dolls or any kind. She hated the sight of them so. And by Thanksgiving, she was crazy and just slammed her presents across the room. Well, by that time, people didn't carry presents around nicely anymore. They flung them over the fence or through the window or anything. And instead of running their tongues out and taking great pains to write, "For dear Papa," or "Mama," or "Brother," or "Sister," or "Susie," or "Sammy," or "Billy," or "Bobby," or "Jimmy," or "Jeannie," or whoever it was, and troubling to get the spelling right and then signing their names and Xmas 1889, they used to write in the gift books, "Take it, you horrid old thing," and then go and bang it against the front door. Nearly everybody had built barns to hold their presents, but pretty soon the barns overflowed. And then they used to let them lie out in the rain or anywhere. Sometimes the police used to come by and tell them to shovel their presents off the sidewalk or they would arrest them. "I thought you said everybody had to go to the poorhouse," interrupted the little girl. "They did go at first," said her papa. "But after a while, the poorhouses got so full that they had to send people back to their own houses. They tried to cry when they got back, but they couldn't make the least sound." Why couldn't they? Because they had lost their voices saying Merry Christmas so much. Did I tell you how it was on the 4th of July? Well, no. How was it the 4th of July? And the little girl nestled closer in expectation of something uncommon. Well, the fireworks were nothing but sugar and candy painted up to look like fireworks. Before 10 o'clock every day, they would try to explode the fireworks, but they wouldn't make any noise because, of course, they were only sugar and candy. The 4th of July orations all turned into Christmas carols, and when anybody tried to read the Declaration of Independence, instead of saying, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary," he was sure to sing, "God rest ye merry gentlemen." It was perfectly awful. Well, the little girl drew a deep sigh of satisfaction. "And how was it at Thanksgiving?" she said. And Papa hesitated. "Well, I'm almost afraid to tell you. I'm afraid you'll think it's wicked." "Well, tell it anyway," said the little girl. Well, before it came Thanksgiving, it had leaked out who had caused all these Christmases. The little girl had suffered so much that she had talked about it in her sleep. And after that, hardly anybody would play with her. People just perfectly despised her because if it had not been for her greediness, it wouldn't have happened. And now when it came Thanksgiving and she wanted them to go to church and to have squash pie and turkey and show their gratitude, they said that all of the turkeys had been eaten up for her old Christmas dinners, and if she would stop Christmases, they would see about gratitude. Wasn't it dreadful? And the very next day, the little girl began to send letters to the Christmas fairy and then telegrams to stop it. But it didn't do any good. And then she repeated each effort and then started visiting the fairy's home. But at the fairy's house, the greeting was such things as not at home or engaged or at dinner or something like that. She never got a chance to see the Christmas fairy herself. So it went on till it came to the old once-a-year Christmas Eve. The little girl fell asleep, and when she woke up in the morning, she found it was all nothing but a dream, suggested the girl sitting on her papa's lap. Oh, no, indeed, said her papa. It was every bit true. Well, what did she find out then? Why, it wasn't Christmas at last on Christmas morning. It wasn't ever going to be anymore because the agreement to have Christmas every day had ended after a year. Now it's time for breakfast. The little girl held her papa fast around the neck. You shan't go if you're going to leave it that way. Well, how do you want it left? Christmas once a year. All right, said her papa. And he went on again. Well, there was the greatest rejoicing all over the country, and it extended clear up into Canada. The people met together everywhere and kissed and cried for joy. The city carts went around and gathered up all of the candy and raisins and nuts and dumped them into the river, and it made the fish perfectly sick. And the whole United States, as far out as Alaska, was one blaze of bonfires where the children were burning up their gift books and presents of all kinds. They had the greatest time. The little girl went on to thank the old fairy because she had stopped it being Christmas. And she said she hoped she would keep her promise and see that Christmas never, never came again. Well, then the fairy frowned and asked her if she was sure she knew what it meant to say never again. And the little girl asked her, why not? And the old fairy said that now she was behaving just as greedily as ever, and she'd better look out. This made the little girl think it all over again very carefully, and she said she would be willing to have it Christmas about once in 1,000 years. And then she said, well, maybe once in 100 years. And then she said, well, maybe every 10 years. And at last she got down to once a year. Then the fairy said that was the good old way that had pleased people ever since Christmas began. And she agreed. And the little girl said, bargains done forever, and skipped off, hippity-hopped, the whole way home. She was so glad. Now, how will that do? Asked the papa. First rate, said the little girl, but she hated to have the story stop and was rather sober. However, her mother put her head in the door at that point and asked her papa, are you never coming to breakfast? And asked, what are you telling this child? Oh, just a little tale, responded the papa. The little girl caught him around his neck again. We know. Don't you tell what, Papa? Don't you tell what?
Our next reader is going to be presenting a very heartwarming Christmas story. It is a favorite of her family. She will explain that in her presentation. And it is written by Helen Steiner Rice, and it is entitled The Christmas Guest. And now I present Molly Catron.
My daddy was a guitar picker, and at Christmas time he loved to entertain us. He would play all the Christmas classics. I think his favorite was I Saw Mama Kissing Santa Claus. And later on he added in there Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. But at one point he would slow the music down and just start playing background guitar, and he would recite this poem. It's one of my favorite Christmas memories. It happened one day at year's end. 2 neighbors called on an old-time friend, and they found his shop so meager and mean, made gay with 1,000 boughs of green. And Conrad was sitting with face ashine when he suddenly stopped as he stitched a twine and said, "Old friends, at dawn today, when the cock was crowing the night away, the Lord came to me in a dream and said, 'I'm coming your guest to be.' So I've been busy with feet astir, strewing my shop with boughs of fir. A table is spread and the kettle is shined, and over the rafter the holly is twined. And now I will wait for my Lord to appear and listen closely so I will hear his steps as he nears my humble place. And I open the door and I look in his face." So his friends went home and left Conrad alone, for all was the happiest day he had known. And for long since his family had passed away, and Conrad had spent many a sad Christmas day. But he knew with the Lord as his Christmas guest, this Christmas would be the dearest and best. And he listened with only joy in his heart. With every sound he would rise with a start and look for the Lord to be standing there in answer to his earnest prayer. So he ran to the window after hearing a sound, but all that he saw on the snow-covered ground was a shabby beggar whose shoes were torn and all of his clothes were ragged and worn. So Conrad was touched when he opened the door, and he said, "Your feet must be frozen and sore, and I have some shoes in my shop for you and a coat that will keep you warm too." So with grateful heart the man went away, but as Conrad noticed the time of the day, he wondered what made the dear Lord so late and how much longer he'd need to wait. When he heard a knock and he ran to the door, but it was only a stranger once more, a bent old crone with a shawl of black and a bundle of kindling piled on her back. She asked for only a place to rest, but that was reserved for Conrad's great guest. But her voice seemed to plead, "Don't send me away. Let me rest for a while on Christmas Day." So Conrad brewed her a steaming cup and told her to sit at the table and sup. But after she left, he was filled with dismay, for he saw that the hours were passing away, and the Lord had not come as he said he would, and Conrad felt sure he had misunderstood. When out of the stillness he heard a cry, "Please help me and tell me where am I?" So again he opened his friendly door and stood disappointed once more. It was only a child who had wandered away and was lost from her family on Christmas Day. Again, Conrad's heart was heavy and sad, but he knew he should make this little child glad. So he called her in and wiped her tears and quieted all her childish fears. Then he led her back to her home once more, but as he entered his own darkened door, he knew that the Lord was not coming today, for the hours of Christmas had passed away. So he went to his room and he knelt down to pray, and he said, "Dear Lord, why did you delay? What kept you from coming to call on me? 'Cause I wanted so much your face to see." When soft in the silence a voice he heard, "Lift up your head, for I kept my word. 3 times my shadow crossed your floor, and 3 times I came to your lonely door. For I was the beggar with bruised cold feet. I was the woman you gave to eat, and I was the child on the homeless street. 3 times I knocked, and 3 times I came in, and each time I found the warmth of a friend. Of all the gifts, love is the best, and I was honored to be your Christmas guest.
Our next reader is Mary Lawrence, and she is bringing her experience as an elementary school teacher and her love of literature with her selection today. She's discovered a new author for her, Cynthia Ryland, and this book was written about Cynthia Ryland's experience of Christmas in Appalachia. She is a Newbery Award winner as an author. The illustrator, as you will see from the pictures in the book, is perfect for the story. And what we would like to feature now is Mary Lawrence reading Christmas in the Country.
Christmas in the Country by Cynthia Ryland, illustrated by Diane Good. When I was a little girl, I lived with my grandparents in the country. Our house was small and white. It had an old coal stove to keep us warm and a tiny little kitchen for supper and a nice back porch for the dogs. In the summer, I sat in our swing and ate fresh tomatoes and sang. In fall, I helped can apples. In spring, I took long walks with my granny. And in winter, I waited for Christmas. Winter in the country is so quiet. The snow slows everything down. Birds are silent and serious. Dogs stay in their warm houses. Children want cocoa and blankets. Everyone is ready for something really special. Everyone is ready for Christmas. My grandfather always got our Christmas tree from the woods behind the house. Off he'd go with his axe, while my grandmother and I pulled boxes of old ornaments from her closet, which smelled like wool and mothballs. I loved those ornaments. Some of them I had made myself. Hard foam bells glued with green glitter, red construction paper chains. There were silver icicles and white glass stars and soft angels. Each ornament reminded me of my whole life. Grandfather always brought home a tree that was a little too wide or a little too tall, and we would have to spend the next few weeks squeezing around it in the living room. It seemed sometimes like an embarrassed guest. But we loved that tree and couldn't wait to turn on the lights at night. It was the prettiest thing we had. On Christmas Eve, my grandparents and I went to services at the small Baptist church at the bottom of the hill. I got to stand up front with the other children and sing a Christmas song for the grown-ups. Afterward, each child was given a small brown bag full of candy and nuts and a tangerine. I gave my grandfather the tangerine because I knew he loved them. My grandparents and I walked home from church through the snow and into our warm little kitchen. We pulled off our wet boots and gloves and hung them near the stove to dry. Then my grandmother helped me write a note to Santa Claus while my grandfather rested. I left Santa a saucer of cookies and a glass of milk and the nicest note I could think of. Then I went to bed. And in the morning, when I woke, it was still a little dark outside and still a little shivery, and I went to my grandparents' bed and asked them to help me see what Santa brought. And they rose up from their warm quilts, and together we all went to the tree. Every Christmas, Santa gave me just what I wanted, a new doll. And he always gave me something else I hadn't asked for, and which was a surprise. A paint-by-number kit, a bear bank, a coloring book. His cookies were always gone, his milk glass empty. I was glad Santa liked everything. I went to church again with my grandparents later that Christmas morning, They let me take my doll. The service was short because the preacher knew everyone wanted to play with their toys and bake their hams. He just reminded us what Christmas was about and sent us home. And all that day, there were aunts and uncles and cousins knocking at the door, neighbors dropping off pies, and dogs barking at all the commotion and waiting for leftovers. My grandparents and I kept our Christmas tree for as long as we could. And then finally, after the New Year, it was time to take it down. Grandfather hauled it out to the woods, while my grandmother and I put the ornaments away. We swept up the needles and the tinsel. Then we all had milk and a biscuit. Christmas in the country was over. There were spring walks and summer tomatoes and fall apples to look forward to now. But in that closet of wool and mothballs, there would be boxes of old ornaments waiting.
Our last reader today is a familiar face to many of you who live in Jonesborough. It is our own Adam Dickson, a town councilman. And we have invited Adam to share in this reading today, and he has selected a special book. Now, he not only is part of the council and the mayor's office here in Jonesborough, but he also has been working with the project in Johnson City with the Langston School and the many programs that they are beginning. And so he comes to us with wonderful experience, a good ability to work with people, and he has selected a wonderful author to share. And so it's with great pleasure that I present to you Adam, who's going to be performing Maya Angelou's A Christmas Poem.
Well, I am here to read Maya Angelou's amazing piece, A Christmas Poem. And I'm very glad to be here today. Thunder rumbles in the mountain passes, and lightning rattles the eaves of our houses. Floodwaters await in our avenues. Snow falls upon snow to avalanche over unprotected villages. The sky slips low and gray and threatening. We question ourselves. What have we done to so affront nature? We interrogate and worry God. Are you there? Are you there, really? Does the covenant you made with us still hold? Into this climate of fear and apprehension, Christmas enters. Streaming lights of joy, ringing bells of hope, and singing carols of forgiveness high up in the bright air. The world is encouraged to come away from rancor, come the way of friendship. It is the glad season. Thunder ebbs to silence and lightning sleeps quietly in the corner. Floodwaters recede into memory. Snow becomes a yielding cushion to aid us as we make our way to higher ground. Hope is born again in the faces of children. It rides on the shoulders of our aged as they walk into their sunsets. Hope spreads around the earth, brightening all things, even hate, which crouches breeding in dark corridors. In our joy, we think we hear a whisper. At first, it is too soft, then only half heard. We listen carefully as it gathers strength. We hear a sweetness. The word is peace. It's loud now, louder than the explosion of bombs. We tremble at the sound. We are thrilled by its presence. It is what we have hungered for, not just the absence of war, but true peace, a harmony of spirit, a comfort of courtesies, security for our beloveds and their beloveds. We clap hands and welcome the peace of Christmas. We beckon this good season to wait a while with us. We, Baptist and Buddhist, Methodist and Muslim, we all say come. Peace, real, authentic peace. Come and fill us with our world with your majesty. We, the Jew, the Jainist, the Catholic, and the Confucian, implore you to stay a while with us so we may learn by your shimmering light how to look beyond complexion and see community. It is Christmas time, a halting of hate time. On this platform of peace, we can create a language to translate ourselves and ourselves to each other. At this holy instant, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ into the great religions of the world. We jubilate the precious advent of trust. We shout with glorious tongues the coming of hope. All the earth's tribes loosen their voices to celebrate the promise of peace. We, angels and mortals, believers and non-believers, look heavenward and speak the word aloud. Peace. We look at our world and speak the word aloud. Peace. We look at each other, then into ourselves, and we say without shyness or apology or hesitation, peace, my brother. Peace, my sister. Peace, my soul.
If you'll remember in the beginning, when we had the introduction to the program, I mentioned the little drummer boy and giving the presents that we have and that we think the others will enjoy and will love. And so we have offered our presents today. Each one of the readers has selected a special book, a book that is meaningful to them and they believe will be meaningful to you. In some cases, you were able to also enjoy the artwork. What we would like to remind you is that these and many other books are available for you at the Storytelling Resource Place, which is located adjacent to Mill Springs Park in Jonesborough, Tennessee. We are going to be available at regular hours starting after Christmas, and we hope that you will join us here and come upstairs to this special room, which is our Read Aloud room, and sit in a chair and enjoy reading aloud to one another and celebrating the kindness of people during this special holiday season. And so we would like to say, we wish you well, have a wonderful Christmas season, and we hope that you come to visit soon.